Now let's go back into the warnings about September the 11th. And I didn't do a lot of this, and we have time. Osama bin Laden is of course a Saudi Arabian by birth. His family is exceptionally wealthy. They own not only major construction companies, but they are heavy investors in high technology stocks like Nortel. They have a piece of Pepsi, I think, and Coca-Cola. They're into everything. They're very wealthy. In 1976, Osama's older brother Salim bin Laden hired a man in Texas by the name of Jim Bath, who has CIA connections, to handle all the investments in the United States for the bin Laden family. Jim Bath also happens to be a personal, almost lifelong friend and former Air National Guard pilot with George W. Bush. And immediately after Jim Bath made the arrangements took over the bin Laden family's finances, Jim Bath made a $50,000 investment in George W. Bush's first company, Arbusto Energy. The connections between the Bushes and the bin Ladens become much more clear as you move forward, and we have reported this in From the Wilderness. Again, I was using stories, and you'll see this. When George Herbert Walker Bush made trips to Saudi Arabia in 1998 and 2000 to meet with the Saudi royal family and to meet with the bin Laden family, which he finally acknowledged, along with former British Prime Minister John Major, on behalf of a company called the Carlyle Group, which is the 11th largest defense contractor in the company in the country. Carlyle Group is a privately owned corporation. That means they do not have to report their ownership or financial activities to the SEC. Yet they provide all kinds of the highest technology equipment to the U.S. Pentagon. And Carlyle, of course, has made several, probably $1 billion, and will as a result of this war. In that context, Osama bin Laden went to Afghanistan in 1979, 1980, maybe the early 80s, to fight the Russians, and he was supported by the CIA. And it's interesting to note that when the Russians invaded Afghanistan, 0%, and this is from Professor Alfred McCoy of the University of Wisconsin, who's also one of my subscribers, in a great book called The Politics of Heroin, 0% of the U.S. consumption of heroin came from Pakistan, Afghanistan before the Russian invasion. By 1985, 86, 40% of the heroin in the United States came from that region, all controlled by the Central Intelligence Agency. And Osama bin Laden came up under a guy named Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, who ran 6 heroin labs, all protected by the CIA and controlled by the agency. He has been a CIA asset for a long period of time. We'll see more about that. He is a CIA creation. Now we come to September 11th, and we're going to go into a timeline here, and I have written several stories, and I was on the radio here with Sheila Hamilton at KPAM just a few days after the attacks, and I was saying the U.S. government knew these attacks were going to take place and did not stop them. And I keep building to that evidence, but I'm going to show you a couple of things now. Not by any means all of the evidence that I have of foreknowledge, but just a couple of telling points. Israeli security issued urgent warning to CIA of large-scale terror attacks. And this is a long story saying that the Israeli Mossad knew that the attacks were going to take place. They knew that the World Trade Center were the targets. This is from the British paper The Telegraph. Two senior experts with Mossad were sent to Washington in August to alert the CIA, and so on and so forth. This is just one of probably 24 examples that I have that are absolutely specific. Now bear in mind that if what I'm showing you is known overtly through the media, how much more does our $30 billion intelligence community know? There's a recurring theme out there that maybe the Israelis did this. You hear that in some right-wing circles. Horsepucky. They didn't do it. They were warning the U.S. hand over fist, and the U.S. did not listen because it needed the attacks. And you will be convinced of that. But here's one of the most telling pieces of evidence that I found. We reviewed the list of former tenants of the World Trade Center at the online Wall Street Journal site, and there's the website. It is an alphabetical list of tenants. Scroll to the very bottom and notice the moving date for the office of Zim American Israeli Shipping to Norfolk, Virginia. They were in the World Trade Center. They must have had Mossad's input because they vacated 1 week before September the 11th, and they broke their lease. The Israelis didn't pull the attack, but they were smart enough to get their people out of the way. How come our government didn't do the same thing for us? Now we're getting into the heart of September the 11th. I picked up this document just a few days after the attacks, September 23rd. And it's from the Herzliya Institute for Counterterrorism. It is an Israeli counterterrorist think tank. Of course it's connected with the Mossad. And what they detailed, this is from the October 15th issue of From the Wilderness. Between September 6th and 7th, the Chicago Board of Options Exchange saw purchases of 4,744 put options on United Airlines and only 396 call options. A put option is basically a bet that the stock price is going to go down. It's a contract that's entered into that's irrevocable. And let's say the gentleman in the suspenders, I do a put option deal with you to sell shares at $100 in 2 weeks, 4 months. 4 months is the standard, but you can write the contract for anything you want. And he's committed now to buy the shares for $100. Well, if I know that the attacks are going to take place, I don't have to deliver the shares until the contract matures. So if I know the stock is going to crash, he enters into a put agreement with me, agrees to buy the shares at $100. The next day the World Trade Center attacks happen. The stocks are selling for $20. I go buy the shares for $20, and he has to buy them for $100. That's how a put option works. That's the short version, okay? So we saw 4,744 put options on United Airlines, but only 396 call options. On September the 10th, 4,516 put options, same deal, were placed on American Airlines, bought on the Chicago Exchange, compared to only 748 calls. There were no other similar trades on any other airlines. And this level of put options was like 600 to 1,200% above normal for United and American Airlines. Now, just these trades alone, there were also put options placed on Merrill Lynch, which had 22 floors. Morgan Stanley had 22 floors, and Merrill Lynch had an offices near. Both were heavily impacted. Heavy put options there, heavy put options on reinsurance companies, Munich Reinsurance, the largest in the world, AXA Reinsurance in France, which owned 25% of American. Totally out of whack. Absolutely spiking. There's another newsletter that says very clearly, by a guy by the name of Phil Erlanger, and this is his newsletter, that the insider trading may have cost $1 billion. Now just these ones that were identified, produced only $2.5 million in instant profits for somebody who knew the attacks were going to take place. Nobody claimed the profits. The San Francisco Chronicle caught it shortly thereafter, and nobody has claimed them since. And we don't know who made the trades. Okay, U.S. companies to invest in Pakistan oil and gas sectors. This is from a Pakistani newspaper, the Frontier Post. The date is, what is the date? October 10th. And what this says, now October the 10th is after we've gone to war, after the attacks on World Trade Center, after we know. Is anybody surprised at how quickly we kind of won in Afghanistan? Okay. Well, the war's been planned for 4 years, and I'm saving the best for last. But the U.S. ambassador to Pakistan met with the Pakistani oil minister and briefed the ambassador on the proposed Turkmenistan-Afghanistan Pakistan gas pipeline, and said that this project opens up new avenues of multidimensional regional cooperation, particularly in view of the recent geopolitical developments in the region. Gee, the pipeline that was blocked is now back on full tilt just days after we started the bombing. Suspicious. Okay, maybe I haven't convinced you of everything, but we're just getting warmed up now. This is how Afghanistan went unlisted as a terror sponsor. This is the story that I found, and it says right here, UNICAL hired former State Department insiders, former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, former Special U.S. Ambassador John. The guy was also, I didn't see that. The UNICAL guy was also a special ambassador. And Robert Oakley, a former U.S. ambassador to Pakistan. You're going to love where Henry Kissinger turns up on this, by the way. All right. This is one other thing about Kissinger. Chinese oil firm picks Kissinger as advisor. This is from November 4th. Thank you. The Chinese National Offshore Oil Company has hired Henry Kissinger to head its foreign advisory board. Now, Kissinger's got the Pakistan end and he's got the China end of this oil pipeline. Who does Henry Kissinger front for?
Rockefeller.
Very good. David Rockefeller. Who's that? Zbigniew Brzezinski. Zbigniew Brzezinski was counselor for strategic and international studies, professor of American foreign policy at Johns Hopkins, national security advisor to President Jimmy Carter, trustee and founder of the Trilateral Commission, member of the Council on Foreign Relations, international advisor to several major corporations, associate of Henry Kissinger, also worked for Ronald Reagan in intelligence capacities. Co-chairman of the Bush National Security Advisory Task Force in 1988. What a guy. Z-Big. Now, if you want to get really, 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 really angry, go buy this book. It's called The Grand Chessboard. American Primacy and Its Geostrategic Objectives. Written by Zbigniew Brzezinski in 1997. I'm going to read you some quotes from that book. Page XII, it's the very first words in the book. The last decades of the 20th century has witnessed a tectonic shift in world affairs. For the first time ever, a non-Eurasian power has emerged not only as a key arbiter of Eurasian power relations, but also as the world's paramount power. The defeat and collapse of the Soviet Union was the final step in the rapid ascendance of a Western Hemisphere power, the United States as the sole and indeed the first truly global superpower. Page XII, it's in the preface. But in the meantime, he says, it is imperative that no Eurasian challenger, Eurasia is everything in between roughly east of Germany all the way to the Pacific Ocean, south through the Indian subcontinent, and includes the Middle East. It's imperative that no Eurasian challenger, by that he means Russia or China, emerges capable of dominating Eurasia and thus of also challenging America. The formulation of a comprehensive and integrated Eurasian geostrategy is therefore the purpose of this book, Geostrategy, Eurasia. The attitude of the American public toward the external projection of American power has been much more ambivalent. The public supported America's engagement in World War II largely because of the shock effect of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. It gets worse. For America, the chief geopolitical prize is Eurasia. Now a non-Eurasian power, that's us, is preeminent in Eurasia, and America's global primacy, isn't that arrogant? America's global primacy is directly dependent on how long and how effectively its preponderance on the Eurasian continent is sustained. What he's saying is that if the U.S. wants to stay top dog, we have to control Eurasia. America's withdrawal from the world, or because of the sudden emergence of a successful rival, would produce massive international stability. It would prompt global anarchy. You know what he's saying there? Yeah, a little global anarchy would probably be a damn good thing right now. What he's saying there is, if we don't control the world by whatever means necessary, world's going to be miserable. He didn't ask my opinion. Did he ask yours? Okay. In that context, how America manages Eurasia, do we manage people around the world? Is that our job? Is critical. Eurasia is the globe's largest continent and is geopolitically axial. A power that dominates Eurasia would control 2 of the world's 3 most advanced and economically productive regions. A mere glance at the map also suggests that control over Eurasia would almost automatically entail Africa's subordination, rendering the Western Hemisphere and Oceania, that's Australia for all of you non-academics, geopolitically peripheral to the world's central continent. About 75% of the world's people live in Eurasia, and most of the world's physical wealth is there as well, both in its enterprises and underneath its soil. Eurasia accounts for 60% of the world's GNP and 3/4 of the world's known energy resources. 2 basic steps are thus required. First, to identify the geostrategically dynamic Eurasian states that have the power to cause a potentially important shift in the international distribution of power, and to decipher the central external goals of their respective political elites and the likely consequences of their seeking to attain them. Second, to formulate specific U.S. policies to offset, co-opt, and or control the above. The man is talking about co-opting, controlling, managing, subverting nations and peoples and economies. To put it in a terminology that harkens back to the more brutal age of ancient empires, the 3 grand imperatives of imperial geostrategy are to prevent collusion and maintain security dependence among the vassals, to keep tributaries pliant and protected, and to keep the barbarians from coming together. That's on page 40. I'm telling you, you got to buy the book. Now we get really serious. On page 95, Uzbekistan, with its much more ethnically homogeneous population of approximately 25 million and its leaders emphasizing the country's historic glories, has become increasingly assertive in affirming the region's new post-colonial status. He saw the first step in this as diminishing the ability of Russia to reassert the dream of the Soviet Union. All the stands in Central Asia were once part of the Soviet Union. The borders were drawn arbitrarily by Lenin and Stalin. And he saw one of the most important steps was to prevent Russia from asserting any control in the region, which we did. You know how we did it? Over the last decade, thanks to Goldman Sachs, the Harvard Endowment, the U.S. Treasury and the Federal Reserve, the World Bank, we looted $300 billion out of the Russian economy. $300 billion. I was there. The Russian population was, 164 million at the fall of the Soviet Union. The population of Russia is today 145 million. In another 10 years, it will be 130 million. The average life expectancy of a male in Russia has dropped to 48 years. Thanks to the economic devastation, the ruin we visited on their economy, it was a deliberate plan to weaken Russia so that it couldn't challenge our move into Eurasia a decade later. But it helps if you see this on the map. Okay, Russia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, and China. Now, the proposed oil route is from here to here, 1,500 miles. China can't build it because it's 5,000 miles, and they don't have the technology to build it. We do, thanks to a company named Halliburton, which was chaired with the CEO was Dick Cheney, right? Okay, they're probably going to build the pipeline. Okay, so now that you see this relationship, what he's saying is you build a block starting with Islamic fundamentalism, which we've supported and created, to keep Russia from moving south to reassert control, but then You build up these countries so that they're so powerful, and with a weakened Russia, Russia can't make a move to control. And all the oil reserves are right in here. Okay? And we have effectively made China dependent upon our technology because they need the oil desperately. Now, Uzbekistan, nationally the most vital and the most populous of the Central Asian states, represents the major obstacle to any renewed Russian control over the region. Its dependence is critical to the survival of other Central Asian states and is the least vulnerable to Russian pressures. Where was the first place that President Bush announced we were sending troops after the attacks on September 11th? We were already there. We'd been training Uzbeki troops for more than 5 years. Referring to an area he calls the Eurasian Balkans and a 1997 map in which he circled the exact location. Now remember, this is a book written 4 years ago. And I'm going to show you a map where Zbigniew Brzezinski said the next world conflict was going to take place. Afghanistan, Iran, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan. This is where he said 4 years ago the United States, in order to sustain its precarious, that's my words, economy, would have to control that to maintain its role as the global superpower and to become the world's only superpower. In effect, the ruling nation of the world. That's his map from 4 years ago. Referring to an area he calls the Eurasian Balkans and a 97 map in which he circled the exact location of the current conflict, describing it as the central region of pending conflict for world dominance, Brzezinski writes, moreover, that the Central Asian republics, are of importance from the standpoint of security and historical ambitions to at least 3 of their most immediate and more powerful neighbors, namely Russia, Turkey, and Iran, with China also signaling an increasing geopolitical interest in the region. And he really lets his hair down. More important as a potential economic prize, an enormous concentration of natural gas and oil reserves is located in the region, in addition to important minerals including gold. Didn't know about the gold, did you? The world's energy consumption is bound to vastly increase over the next 2 or 3 decades. Estimates by the U.S. Department of Energy anticipate that world demand will rise by more than 50% between 1993 and 2015, with the most significant increase in consumption occurring in the Far East, China. The momentum of Asia's economic development is already generating massive pressures for the exploration and exploitation of new sources of energy in the Central Asian region, and the Caspian Sea basin are known to contain reserves of natural gas and oil that dwarf those of Kuwait, the Gulf of Mexico, and the North Sea. Once pipelines to the area have been developed, Turkmenistan's truly vast natural gas reserves augur a prosperous future. He's talking about the pipelines. Without sustained and directed American involvement, before long the forces of global disorder. Global disorder? You mean democracy? Global disorder could come to dominate the world scene, and the possibility of such a fragmentation is inherent in the geopolitical tensions not only of today's Eurasia, but of the world more generally. The most immediate task is to make certain that no state or combination of states gains the capacity to expel the United States from Eurasia, or even to diminish significantly its decisive arbitration role. In the long run, global politics are bound to become increasingly uncongenial to the concentration of hegemonic power in the hands of a single state. Hence, America is not only the first as well as the only truly global superpower, but is also likely to be the very last. And what does he say that's going to happen? He says that the United States will fold into a one-world government in which all nations will cease to exist, run by corporations. I'm paraphrasing it. Now, hold your breath. Very last pages in the book. Moreover, as America becomes an increasingly multicultural society, it may find it more difficult to fashion a consensus on foreign policy issues except in the circumstance of a truly massive and widely perceived direct external threat. Read it again, she said. Maybe I should read this with a German accent. Wait a minute. Moreover, as America becomes an increasingly multicultural society, it may find it more difficult to fashion a consensus on foreign policy issues, except in the circumstance of a truly massive and widely perceived direct external threat. Listen, I want you to know that the Third Reich did not lose the Second World War. It just changed venues. Now we're going to close with a summation. And you all are still with me. Nobody's fallen over in their chairs, right? Can I have a minute to take a hit off my Pepsi here? All right. Now I'm going to run you through a timeline, which is what a detective would do for a prosecutor. I'm going to run you through a series of events with some information that's absolutely going to curl your socks. Or something. And let's start with some of this we've covered. 1998 and 2000, former President George Bush travels to Saudi Arabia on behalf of the Carlyle Group, the 11th largest defense contractor. While there, he meets privately with the Saudi royal family and the bin Laden family. Source, Wall Street Journal, September 27th. Also from The Wilderness, that's my newsletter, The Best Enemies Money Can Buy. And I hope some of you folks are going to subscribe tonight. Chris, wherever you are, raise your hand. January 2001, the Bush administration orders the FBI and intelligence agencies to back off investigations involving the bin Laden family, including two of Osama bin Laden's relatives, Abdullah and Omar bin Laden. There goes the black sheep theory, who were living, guess where? In Falls Church, Virginia, right next to CIA headquarters. This followed previous orders dating back to 1996, that's under Bill Clinton, frustrating efforts to investigate the bin Laden family. Source, BBC Newsnight correspondent Greg Palast. And on the TV broadcast, he actually held up an FBI national security report showing that the Bureau had been ordered to leave the bin Ladens alone. By the way, this is just for your edification. This is a copy of the BBC report showing that the Bush administration ordered the FBI to stop investigating the bin Laden family in January, right after taking office. February 13th, UPI terrorism correspondent Richard Sale, while covering a trial of bin Laden's al-Qaeda followers, reports that the National Security Agency has broken bin Laden's encrypted communications. They introduced the evidence into court. The NSA had broken his secure communications. Even if this indicates that bin Laden changed systems in February, it does not mesh with the fact that the government insists that the planning for the September 11th attacks took years. May 2001, Secretary of State Colin Powell gives $43 million in aid to the Taliban. Why? Good question. Purportedly to assist hungry farmers who are starving since the destruction of their opium crop. And in January on the orders of the Taliban. Source, the Los Angeles Times, May 22. June 2001, German intelligence, the BND, the Bundesnachrichtendienst, warns the CIA and Israel that Middle Eastern terrorists are planning to hijack commercial aircraft to use as weapons to attack important symbols of American and Israeli culture. Source, the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, that's a great newspaper in Germany, September 14th. July 2001. 3 American officials, Tom Simmons, former U.S. ambassador to Pakistan, Carl Inderfurth, former Assistant Secretary of State, Lee Coldren, former State Department expert on South Asia, meet with Pakistani and Russian intelligence officers in Berlin and tell them that the U.S. is planning military strikes against Afghanistan in October. A French book, La Vérité Interdite, discloses that Taliban representatives often sat in on the meetings. U.S. is going to the Taliban, now get this, and says, we're going to bomb you to smithereens in October. Could we call that provocation? Historically, there is a model. Franklin Roosevelt shut off the Japanese from oil supplies in the late 30s and early 40s to provoke them into attacking Pearl Harbor. Sources: The Guardian, September 22nd, the BBC, September 18th, and the Interpress News Service in Pakistan, November 16th. Summer 2001, according to a September 26th story in Britain's The Guardian, correspondent David Lee reported that U.S. Department of Defense official Jeffrey Starr visited Tajikistan in January. The Guardian's Felicity Lawrence established that U.S. Rangers were training special troops in Kyrgyzstan at that time. And there were unconfirmed reports that Tajik and Uzbek special troops were training in Alaska and Montana. Summer 2001, Pakistani ISI chief General Mahmoud, remember the guy I talked about, the guy that has to be approved by the CIA director by treaty? You're going to love this. Pakistani ISI chief General Mahmoud orders an aide to wire transfer $100,000 to Mohammed Atta, the lead hijacker. Who was, according to the FBI, the lead terrorist in the suicide hijackings. Mahmoud recently resigned after the transfer was disclosed in India and confirmed by the FBI. Source: The Times of India, October 11th. Our allies wiring $100,000 to the lead hijacker before the attacks. Summer 2001, an Iranian man phones the U.S. law enforcement to warn of an imminent attack on the World Trade Center in the week of September the 9th. World Trade Center, September the 9th. German police confirmed the calls but state the U.S. Secret Service would not reveal any information. I got this from the German news agency Online, i.e. September 14th, 2001. August 2001. The FBI arrests an Islamic militant linked to bin Laden in Boston. French intelligence sources confirm the man is a key member of bin Laden's network, and the FBI learns that he has been taking flying lessons in Boston. At the time of his arrest in Boston, where two of the planes are hijacked, the man is in possession of technical information on Boeing aircraft and flight manuals. Reuters, September 13th. Summer 2001, Russian intelligence notifies the CIA that 25 terrorist pilots have been specifically training for suicide missions. This is reported in the Russian press, and I have one of my sources, I have several sources who are former CIA officers, translated the article for me. July 4th through 14th, Osama bin Laden receives treatments for kidney disease at the American hospital in Dubai and meets with the CIA official who returns to CIA headquarters on July 15th. This is the guy who blew up the coal and the embassies that Bill Clinton signed an order it's okay to execute. He gets treatment at an American hospital in Dubai and flies out on a private plane. Oliver North in the 80s, Oliver North is one of my least favorite people, but he sent Navy planes to track down terrorists on the Achille Lauro. The moment bin Laden entered international airspace, he would have been fair game. The source for this story is Le Figaro, French newspaper, October 31st. Now, I got to throw in a caveat here. Le Figaro is owned by the Carlyle Group. These guys can't control everybody, okay? And they can't control reporters. Le Figaro was emphatic that they had confirmed the details of the story. The CIA immediately came out with an adamant denial, but the CIA never lies. So did some people at the hospital. But you don't have to take this story as all or everything. But Le Figaro has not retracted the story. August 2001, Russian President Vladimir Putin orders Russian intelligence to warn the U.S. government in the strongest possible terms of imminent attacks on airports and government buildings. I watched it on MSNBC on September the 15th. August-September 2001, the Dow Jones Industrial Average drops nearly 900 points in the 3 weeks prior to the attack. A major stock market crash is imminent. September 3 through 10. MSNBC reports on September 16th that a caller to the Cayman Islands to a Cayman Islands radio talk show gave several warnings of an imminent attack on the U.S. by bin Laden in the week prior to 9/11. These are just some of the advanced warning bits that we have. Now, September 1 through 10. Some 25,000 British troops, the largest British naval armada since the Falkland Island War. It's not Essential Harvest, it's called Swift Sword. An operation in the planning for 4 years. Are set to deploy to Oman in the week before the September 11th attacks. It takes years to plan this kind of a deployment. And yet the British government had been planning it for 4 years. After the attack on the 11th, there was a slight hiccup. They waited, but the deployment went ahead as scheduled, supposedly to support the U.S. But you have to understand, I don't know how many veterans we have in this room, but you have to understand that it takes months and months and months to deploy these kinds of personnel. Yet they're already set to go to Oman. At the same time, 2 U.S. aircraft carrier battle groups happen to be rendezvousing off the Pakistani coast. This is not a normal deployment. The Pakistani coast is not the Persian Gulf, it's the Arabian Sea. Yet we have 2 aircraft carrier battle groups off the Pakistani coast, and at the same time, some 17,000 U.S. troops join more than 23,000 NATO troops for Operation Bright Star in Egypt. Fully deployed, combat ready, locked and loaded. All before September the 11th. Is this suspicious? I think so. September 6th through 7th. We have the 4,744 put options on United Airlines, CIA monitoring stock trading in real time. September 10th, 4,500 put options are purchased on American. September 6th through the 11th, no other airlines show any similar trading patterns to those experienced by UAL and American. The put option purchases on both airlines were 600% above normal. September 6th through 10th, put options on Merrill Lynch, Morgan Stanley, AXA Reinsurance, and Munich Re. It has been documented, and I talked about this through the Promise software, that intelligence agencies routinely track the stock trading. And I'll tell you what I think, an opinion here, happened, is that someone at CIA told the head of A.B. Brown, and the head of A.B. Brown decided to make himself a little money on the side, and he got caught because the stock market was shut down because, well, we'll come to that in a second. General Mahmoud of the ISI, the guy that wired $100,000 to Mohammed Atta, the guy that had to be approved by the CIA, happened to be in Washington on September the 11th. He had arrived the week before. I think he was discussing war plans. That's from MSNBC. September the 11th. For 35 minutes from 8:15 a.m. until 9:05 a.m. with it widely known to the FAA and the military that 4 planes had been simultaneously hijacked and taken off course. No one notifies the President of the United States. It is not until 9:30 that any Air Force planes are scrambled to intercept, but by then it is too late. This means that the National Command Authority waited for 75 minutes before scrambling aircraft, even though it was known that 4 simultaneous hijackings had occurred, an event that has never happened in history. Sources: CNN, ABC, MSNBC, the Los Angeles Times, and the New York Times. And if you go to my website, you will see the beginning of a fabulous series of articles out of Canada. They've established clearly, using documents that have now been taken down off of U.S. Air Force websites, that it is a matter of routine policy on the FAA and the U.S. Air Force to scramble a jet the instant any airliner is hijacked without waiting for an order from the President.
What does that mean, scramble? I don't know, sorry.
You put them up in the air and make them go intercept the jet, not shoot it down, but you put a fighter aircraft in the airspace with the hijacked airliner. It's FAA routine procedure. It doesn't require an order from the President of the United States. Remember Payne Stewart? Remember his airplane? Remember it went off course? It was off course for no more than 10 minutes, and fighter jets had been scrambled to fly along beside it. Now, if we have 4 simultaneous hijackings, why were no planes scrambled to intercept those planes for 75 minutes? The Andrews Air Force Base website has taken down information saying that it maintained a ready response scramble force to protect the skies over Washington, D.C. Presidential order is not necessary to intercept an aircraft. It is necessary to shoot down an aircraft. And yet the government has committed a lot of lies. Dick Cheney has lied about U.S. Air Force response. I used to work outside Andrews Air Force Base. I saw F-16s, F-18s, F-15s taken off all the time.
So they took down that site?
They have changed the site. It has been archived and saved. If you go to my website, go to the articles, you can get links to the way it used to read. Okay? All right. September 13th. China is admitted to the World Trade Organization after 15 years of unsuccessful attempts. The vote was taken, it was just ratified about a week ago, but that was the vote. Nobody noticed. September 15th, the New York Times reports that Mayo Shattuck III, the head of A.B. Brown in the United States, resigned effective immediately without explanation. The insider trading, September 15th was the first day that the stock market opened after the attacks. September 29th, the San Francisco Chronicle reports that 2.5 million in put options on American Airlines and UAL are unclaimed. This is the result of the suspension in trading. Nobody showed up to claim it. October 10th, the Pakistani newspaper Frontier Post reports that Ambassador Wendy Chamberlain has called on the Pakistani oil minister. The pipeline is now a go. Mid-October 2001, the Dow Jones is back up near 10,000 as a result of the massive looting. Outpouring of cash. All right, we are living, get this, in an empire. Bill Sapphire said this about George W. Bush. He said, "On what legal meat does this our Caesar feed?" Bill Sapphire said that. Okay? And it is an empire. Now, I want to go all the way back, and I want to take you back before I shut up here and leave you with one of my favorite quotes of all time. The foundation of all mental illness is the avoidance of legitimate suffering. And the country is mentally ill. It'll wake up sooner or later. I don't know when. I'm not God. I don't know where this is going. I know that my job is to teach. My job is to give you information. And my job is to clarify for you what's at stake here. And you better rest assured, as sure as I'm standing here tonight, that the war that's supposed to be taking place against terrorism is also a war against you. Thank you very much.